We know that the markets are going to get yet another snapshot into the health of the labor market when the Department of Bureau of Labor Statistics releases its February report that's supposed to happen tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. At this time, we know that economists are expecting a growth of jobs with the unemployment rate holding steady at 4%. To talk a bit more about this, I want to bring into the conversation now Jessica Kriegel. She's going to give us a bit more of an update on what things are looking like as we're looking ahead to the market. Thank you so much for being with us here on Live Now.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's first start out this jobs report preview. What are you expecting to see once it's released tomorrow morning?
I think people are going to be shocked at how boring the jobs report is. We're probably going to see somewhere between 4 and 4.2%. And that's going to feel disjointed with the reality that we have experienced over the last month. As you see the federal government laying off such a significant portion of people, you see big headlines in the corporate sector as well. And so people will probably scratch their heads and be surprised at why that doesn't match up with their experience. And it's because really, if you want to understand the jobs report more specifically, you have to go into it and look at it sector by sector. There will be, for example, in the tech industry, in the retail industry, in the public sector, you will probably see a surplus, whereas in manufacturing and supply chain and healthcare, you'll probably see a labor shortage. And so the real story lies in the details. And as we know, most people are headliners. They just read the headline. And so the headline is not going to be that interesting. Really, if you want to understand what's happening in the job market, you have to dig deeper.
And let's talk about what's been happening there with the federal workforce as well. We know that there have been layoffs as, again, President Trump has been promoting Elon Musk as he's leading the Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE. What are these things do? Are they affecting the job market at all as well?
Absolutely, because as we know at Culture Partners, experiences shape beliefs, and that leads us to take actions, the beliefs we hold. And so these headlines are an experience. We're seeing massive uncertainty. We're seeing unexpected headlines. That headline is not just about the layoffs. It's also about tariffs. It's also about DEI. It's also about all of these changes that will affect corporations. And business leaders are saying, this uncertainty has me baffled. I have a belief now that maybe I don't know what the future holds. And so this is going to require a more adaptive strategy in order to respond to that. Interestingly, we did research with Stanford last year that showed that the companies that win the most are the companies that have an adaptive culture. The ability to shift your strategy, shift your culture in response to these changing times is what will allow you to win. And that takes a lot of work. Transformation efforts are challenging, and that's really where people need to be focused right now.
And let's talk about some of the impacts that you said. And things are more so sector by sector. Can you talk about what specifically we should be watching out for certain sectors that are doing the best versus some that are really struggling at this time?
Well, let's talk about the tech sector, for example. The layoffs will continue. Those have been the largest headlines in the corporate sector. And the layoffs in the tech sector are due to multiple things. AI, obviously, is replacing jobs, already has started, despite what some people try and say. The other thing that's happening is we have mature technology companies that have essentially developed their platforms and don't need as many developers. They're in the next phase of the evolution of their scaling. And so therefore, they're also going to continue to have layoffs. I think most of the technology companies have the most employees that they will ever have. They won't really go into more growth mode at that point. So you look at companies like that in the technology sector, they're having a very different experience than healthcare. Healthcare, there is a labor shortage. We are struggling to find the nurses. We're struggling to find people in all of the different job roles there. And so that will continue to be a challenge. It's the tale of two economies, really. It just depends on where you are and how you will be affected.
And that's something we're going to continue to watch here on Live Now. Jessica, let's talk about the current job market and how it's also affecting the overall culture there in the workforce. Some folks seem excited, saying that they're happy to still have their jobs. We were also worried during COVID. What are things looking like now, and how is it affecting culture in the aftermath?
Well, what's interesting is you see certain companies responding very quickly to some of these headlines, which seems like an adaptive approach, right? So Honda just announced that the next generation of Civics is going to be built in Indiana as opposed to overseas. Apple made the same announcement, 20,000 jobs in Texas. And so that's a very quick response to the tariffs announcement, which then becomes there's an extension. And will that really land true? I believe that some of that may be intentional headline creation, right? It could be perhaps someone from the administration called someone from the company and said, why don't you make this announcement? And it's part of a plan to make this seem like a positive thing. That's been done through many, many decades of our history, right? Where I'm seeing business leaders challenge the most now is in breaking down silos that have always existed in businesses. They need to be broken down more now than ever. Because if you look at tariffs, for example, that historically was something that public affairs took care of. Well, now tariffs, that change in policy is going to affect production. It's going to affect sales. It's going to affect HR and legal and compliance. Everyone is affected by tariffs, and there isn't one owner of tariffs. And so accountability, shared ownership, joint accountability becomes a skill set that we're seeing people lean into now more than ever, so that we can really drive results even amid all of this noise and these changes that we don't necessarily know if they really will follow through or not.
And again, we know that that jobs report will officially be out tomorrow morning. Jessica, any final parting thoughts before I let you go?
One quick thought is that we can see a sneak peek of what that jobs report will say in the layoff report that already did come out. There was 172,000 jobs that were cut in February. That's the highest since July 2020. 62,000 of those were from the federal government. And to give you some perspective, 172,000 this February compared to last February was only 84,000. Compared to last month, it was only 49,000. So these layoffs they go way beyond the federal government. We're seeing that across the board in both the corporate and the federal government sector. So right now we have a lot of people looking for work.
And of course, that's a story that we're going to continue to follow here on Live Now from Fox, especially as these new numbers come out tomorrow morning. Jessica Kriegel there, Culture Partners, helping us break down the very latest. We appreciate you for joining us here on Live Now.
Thank you so much for having me.